So there are a lot of different organizations that claim to do what the federation is doing. Social media sites like Meta, which is Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. We have Twitter. What separates the federation social media site and the federation as a whole from all these organizations and social media sites that have been under fire, for example, for selling users' data and breaching, privacy? What makes the federation social media platform and the federation alone, in general, different from organizations such as, say, the IMF? Why should an individual put their trust on the federation?
Let's start from the top downward, because there's a lot of people that need to have a seat at that table in order to create a
Yeah,
really equitable system. So, at the very top level, social media sites have been used to encroach on people's privacy on behalf of corporations, governments, and various things like that that were have led to quite anti-democratic outcomes.
yeah,
And we are not a social media company. We are more of a logistics company that has a social media component.
yeah,
You see a lot of the disruptions that go on in society because someone owns a certain thing that everyone else demand on, and because they have that exclusive contract, or they have this or that, the other thing, because they have that de facto monopoly, they can start asking what prices they want. And then they discover, oh, if there's a supply chain disruption, all prices go up and I get a larger cut of everything. And then my costs go up, of course. And then you get this negative feedback loop. And
yeah,
that's because we've we've been taken over by international middlemen, where people are being separated from the natural resources of their community on behalf of these international middlemen who have
yeah,
that privileged access to credit.
yeah,
And they spend a lot of money to be unaccountable. And they spend a lot of money
yeah,
to also instill philosophy in the greater society through the corporate media system, that all the problems they pay to exist in government are pushed on government, not the source of the actual money. When you're doing to use an analogy, a or perhaps literal crime investigation, you follow the money.
yeah,
So let's actually follow that money back to the source, and it leads back to these people that control that bottleneck on energy and various things like that, because they say, "Oh, look, the less there is, the more I can charge." So you have market manipulation happening at every level, because the
yeah,
higher prices you can demand, the more you're going to be goosing your books, which in turn gives you more access to that credit through the private equity system,
yeah,
where you go and then get loans from the bank, which has the access to the reserve window and whatnot.
yeah,
And so they're kind of gaming the system to get access to more and more credit. And at the same time, because all of those, everything is going down for the worker and everything is going up for them. So the working class has less access to credit, while the corporations have more access to credit, and that continues that negative cycle of corruption within those governments.
yeah,
So it, that's one aspect, but then there's also the IMF aspect, where,
yeah,
much like the student loan system has done on the individual level, the IMF, at least in my view, um, they give loans to corrupt leaders often,
yeah,
who they take a nice tidy cut, and well, because we yeah, clearly, if this country was more stable, we could trust that own country's company to
Yeah.
exploit the natural resources. But I'm sorry, we've we as a bank have worked with this company before, so everything has to go to them, which it is in effect for them giving their client a
Yeah.
loan, not you alone, the client the loan, which gives them access to more credit too.
Yeah.
So while the loan is on the books of the country, the loan is the profit of the client.
Yeah.
Because the country is being led by someone who's taking such a cut from a corrupt system, that
Yeah.
means those dollars do even less for that country.
Yeah.
And then eventually you get enough social upheaval, that leader goes into exile with their many millions in whatever bank account somewhere,
Yeah.
while the country itself, with all of its natural resources, is left with billions of dollars in debt and still no economy.
Yeah.
And and then at that stage, the IMF, the creditor, gets to say, well, I'm afraid that your loan isn't good, so we need this mine, that mine, or however they want to demand it be settled.
Yeah.
And this just happens over and over again. So it's doing at a international scale what is exactly being done to the American student through the student loan system, where they're like, you need this loan, which is really going to the for-profit school system. You need this loan to make your future thrive. And then that school gets to make the money, and then the employer gets to make the money, and the school and the employer are the clients, the more important clients of the bank,
Yeah.
because the working staff, well, they're the ones who just provide some of the basis off of which the bank does its lending. So of course the banks have more interest in the success of these entities than those entities, because well, we're all varying levels of publicly traded and whatnot, and we generally operate in the same cultural circles and various things like that. And the same thing happens up at that international level. And just like we want to utilize the system to create a better education system that isn't always having their hand out, we
Yeah.
also want to use the system to pay off the student debt. And if you watch the first video that we actually put out, it kind of describes how the dual stage of the energy credit on the Federation books operates a lot like a war bond, which it then uses the green energy to mature that bond, which creates the final energy credit, which is then distributed as part of that UBI system.
Yeah.
The same thing can be done for a country, just at a much larger scale, from that country's own holdings, and that in turn can be used to pay off those IMF loans. So while the IMF gives loans to create a level of dependency so they can leverage the working class of that nation, ultimately turning that government into a occupational force of the working class than a functional functional governance of a healthy society.
Yeah.
That's where you get all these various instabilities that the developing world is dealing with. It's we in the United States are dealing with the consequences of the colonization of our young's bank accounts, and you're dealing with the colonization of your national bank accounts.
Yeah.
But the same effective strategies are being done, just at vastly different scales, to the point where they don't show through as, oh, that's the same scale. So what our system is a top to bottom approach of, okay, we all depend on communication logistics. That's a federation priority. We all depend on a healthy uh, educational system. That's a federation priority. The investment in economic development in small towns and developing nations, that should be a priority, which it isn't for Wall Street, because small towns and such, they're just there to be exploited for their natural resources, while cities exist to be exploited for their workers.